In the shadowed halls of Ashburn Manor, a cryptic letter signed L.V. Dawes, the legendary Hercule Poirot from retirement with a chilling promise, a mystery that will unravel a century-old murder. A stolen sapphire brooch, whispered to carry a curse, sparks a web of deceit among a reclusive heiress, a disgraced politician, a cunning actress, and a secretive historian, who is L.V. Why was the jewel hidden in a secret vault? And what deadly truth threatens to destroy them all? As Poirot's little grey cells race against time, each clue footprints in the fog, a coded message, a midnight attack pulls you deeper into a suspenseful puzzle where nothing is as it seems. The shadowed invitation in the waning light of an autumn afternoon. Hercule Poirot sat in his modest cottage in the English countryside, the air thick with the scent of damp leaves and wood smoke. His once impeccable moustache drooped slightly, a concession to age, and his movements were slower, deliberate, as he adjusted the spectacles perched on his nose. The fire in the hearth crackled softly, casting flickering shadows across the room, where a single letter lay open on his polished oak desk. It was an unusual missive, written in an elegant looping script, and signed only with the initials L.V. The words danced with intrigue, hinting at a mystery that demanded his singular intellect. "Monsieur Poirot," it began, "your presence is requested at Ashburn Manor for a weekend gala. A matter of utmost delicacy awaits your discernment." No further explanation, no overt plea, just a challenge, veiled in courtesy. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Retirement had dulled the edges of his days, filling them with gardening and the occasional crossword, but his little grey cells still hungered for a puzzle. He traced a finger over the heavy cream paper, noting the faint watermark of a rose. The invitation was no mere social call. It was a summons, cloaked in civility. He leaned back, his mind already turning. Ashburn Manor, he recalled, was a grand estate in Sussex, its history steeped in whispered tales of scandal and splendour. The initials L.V. stirred no immediate recognition, but their anonymity was itself a lure. "A bean," he murmured. "The game, it begins." By noon the next day, Poirot's hired car wound through the rolling hills of Sussex, the landscape a patchwork of gold and russet under a sky heavy with clouds. The driver, a taciturn man with a penchant for whistling, glanced at Poirot in the rearview mirror. "Ashburn's a queer place, sir," he offered, breaking the silence. "Folks say it's haunted, what with all them old stories." Poirot raised an eyebrow, his expression unreadable. "Ghosts, mon ami, are often merely secrets that refuse to stay buried," he replied, his voice crisp with a trace of his Belgian accent. The driver chuckled, but Poirot's thoughts were elsewhere. Cataloguing the possibilities that awaited, the car crested a hill, and Ashburn Manor came into view, its Gothic spires piercing the mist like the teeth of some ancient beast. Ivy clung to its weathered stone walls, and the windows gleamed with an almost defiant brightness. As the car crunched to a stop on the gravel drive, a butler, tall, gaunt, and impeccably dressed, emerged to greet him. "Monsieur Poirot, I presume," the man intoned, his voice as smooth as polished marble. "I am Grayson, the butler. The master of the house awaits you." Poirot nodded, adjusting his hat, and followed Grayson into the manor's cavernous. Hauled out inside, the air was heavy with the scent of beeswax and old wood. A massive chandelier hung overhead, its crystals catching the light like frozen tears. Grayson led Poirot to a drawing room where a fire roared in a cavernous fireplace. The room was a study in opulence, velvet drapes, mahogany furniture, and a portrait of a stern-faced woman in Victorian garb glaring down from above the mantel. Waiting there was the host, Lord Reginald Ashburn, a wiry man in his 60s with sharp blue eyes and a smile that seemed to hover between warmth and calculation. "Monsieur Poirot, a delight," Lord Ashburn exclaimed, striding forward to clasp Poirot's hand. "Your reputation precedes you. I trust the journey was pleasant." Poirot inclined his head, his gaze sweeping the room. "Most satisfactory, Lord Ashburn. But I confess, I am curious about this invitation. The initials LVR, not yours, I presume." Lord Ashburn's smile faltered, just for a moment, before he recovered. "A small mystery, perhaps," he said lightly. "The gala is a gathering of notable guests, and I dare say you'll find it diverting. Come, let me introduce you." The drawing-room soon filled with the other guests, each a distinct thread in the tapestry of intrigue. Poirot sensed weaving around him. First was Miss Eleanor Vane, a reclusive heiress whose fortune was rumoured to rival the crown's. Her pale, angular face was framed by a cascade of silver hair, and her eyes darted nervously, as if expecting a shadow to leap from the walls. She spoke little, her fingers twisting a lace handkerchief as she nodded at Poirot's greeting. Next came Sir Harold Cresswell, a disgraced politician whose fall from grace had been spectacular, involving a bribery scandal that still lingered in the headlines. His jovial demeanour felt forced, his laughter too loud, as he clapped Poirot on the shoulder and offered a cigar, which Poirot politely declined. Then there was Madame Celeste Dubois, a celebrated actress whose beauty had once set London's theatres ablaze. Now, in her 40s, her charm was undimmed, though her eyes held a calculating edge as she extended a gloved hand to Poirot. "Monsieur, I've heard you unravel mysteries as easily as one might a knot," she purred, her French accent a deliberate flourish. Poirot smiled, his moustache twitching. "A knot, madame, is only as complex as the hands that tied it," he replied, eliciting a laugh that rang a touch too sharp. Finally, there was Dr. Mortimer Quill, a historian whose stooped posture and wire-rimmed spectacles belied a mind as sharp as a blade. He shook Poirot's hand with a grip surprisingly firm, his eyes lingering on the detective as if measuring him. "I've read of your methods, Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice low and precise. "I wonder what you'll make of our secrets?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Secrets, monsieur, are my specialty." Dinner was announced, and the guests moved to a dining room that gleamed with silver and crystal. The table was set for a feast, with roasted pheasant, truffled potatoes, and a claret that glowed like rubies in the candlelight. Poirot, seated between Miss Vane and Madame Dubois, observed the interplay of glances and silences. Lord Ashburn was a gracious host, steering conversation toward art and literature, but Poirot noted how Miss Vane's fork trembled when the topic of family legacies arose. Sir Harold, meanwhile, deflected questions about his political career with booming anecdotes, though his eyes flicked nervously toward Dr. Quildot as the dessert coarse poached pears drizzled with caramel was served. Poirot leaned toward Miss Vane. "This manner, it has a history, Nan?" he asked softly. She stiffened, her lips parting as if to speak, but then she murmured, "Old houses always do, monsieur." Her tone was guarded, and Poirot filed the moment away, his attention shifting to Dr. Quill, who was describing a rare manuscript he'd uncovered in the Manor's library. "It speaks of a tragedy," Quill said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. a death long forgotten, yet its echoes linger. The meal concluded, and the guests retired to the drawing-room for coffee. Poirot lingered near a window, the night beyond, a velvet curtain studded with stars. He sipped his coffee, savouring its bitterness, when a low, heated exchange caught his ear. Across the room, Sir Harold and Madame du Bois stood near a bookcase, their voices hushed but intense. "You promised discretion," Sir Harold hissed. His face flushed. Madame du Bois's smile was icy. "And you promised payment, cher ami. Debts must be settled." Poirot's eyes narrowed, but before he could approach, Grayson appeared, announcing that the guest rooms were ready. Poirot's room was a study in understated luxury, a four-poster bed, a fireplace glowing softly, and a window overlooking the manor's sprawling gardens. As he unpacked his small valise, his fingers brushed the letter from LV. He reread it, the words now tinged with the evening's undercurrents, the argument he'd overheard, Miss Vane's unease, quills, cryptic references, each was a thread, and Poirot's mind was already weaving them into a pattern. He set the letter on the bedside table, beside a silver candlestick, and changed into his dressing gown. A faint creak from the hallway made him pause. He opened his door a fraction, peering into the dimly lit corridor. A shadow moved at the far end, too swift to identify, vanishing around a corner. Poirot's lips curved slightly. "The game, it is afoot," he whispered, closing the door. He extinguished the candle and settled into bed, the manor's silence wrapping around him like a cloak. The mystery was unfolding, its pieces scattered but tantalizingly close. For the first time in months, Poirot felt the thrill of the chase, his little grey cells humming with anticipation. Tomorrow he would begin to unravel Ashburn's secrets, but for now he was content. The invitation had promised a puzzle, and it had not disappointed. As he drifted towards sleep, the manor seemed to sigh, its ancient walls holding their breath. The shadowed invitation had brought Poirot here, and he knew, with a certainty that warmed his heart, that the truth, whatever it might be, would be nothing less than extraordinary. The masked ball the following evening. Ashburn Manor thrummed with the anticipation of the masked ball, its grand ballroom transformed into a realm of enchantment. Golden light spilled from chandeliers, their prisms scattering rainbows across. Polished marble floors, tapestries depicting pastoral scenes swayed faintly in the draught from open terrace doors, where the night air carried the scent of jasmine. Hercule Poirot stood at the room's edge, his black domino mask accentuating the sharp glint in his eyes. His attire, a tailored suit with a silk cravat, was impeccable, though the cane he now relied upon lent him a touch of fragility. Yet his mind was as agile as ever, cataloguing every detail: the swirl of gowns, the clink of champagne flutes, the undercurrent of whispers beneath the orchestra's waltz. The guests, cloaked in anonymity, moved like pieces on a chessboard. Poirot recognized Miss Eleanor Vane by her silver hair, now half hidden beneath a feathered mask resembling a swan. She hovered near a column, her posture rigid, as if guarding herself against the revelry. Sir Harold Cresswell, his bulk unmistakable, despite a lion mask, laughed too heartily at a jest, his eyes darting to the shadows. Madame Celeste Dubois glided through the crowd, her crimson gown and peacock mask drawing every gaze. Her laughter a melody that masked calculation. Dr. Mortimer Quill, in a plain black mask, lingered near a table laden with crystal decanters, his fingers tracing the edge of a glass as he scanned the room. Poirot sipped a glass of mineral water, his senses attuned to the room's pulse. The invitation from LV had promised a mystery, and last night's overheard argument between Sir Harold and Madame Dubois had hinted at secrets simmering beneath the manor's polished surface. Now, the ball offered a stage for those secrets to reveal themselves. He moved toward the refreshment table, where Dr. Quill stood alone, his gaze fixed on Miss Vane. "A splendid evening, Monsieur Quill," Poirot said, his voice light but probing. "The masks they make, the truth, elusive." Nan Quill's lips twitched, his eyes narrowing behind his mask. "Masks only hide what one wishes to conceal, Monsieur Poirot. Some truths are better left in shadow." His tone was measured, but Poirot caught a flicker of unease. Before he could press further, a commotion near the centre of the ballroom drew their attention. Sir Harold, his lion mask askew, had bumped into a waiter, sending a glass of Burgundy crashing to the floor. The wine spread like blood across the marble, and Sir Harold's apology was loud, almost theatrical. Yet Poirot noted his hands clenched, trembling, betraying a tension that belied his jovial facade. Madame Dubois appeared at Sir Harold's side, her smile radiant but sharp. "Mon cher, you are too clumsy for such elegance," she teased, her voice carrying over the music. The crowd laughed, but Poirot saw Sir Harold's jaw tighten, his eyes flashing with something akin to fear. Miss Vane, still by her column, turned away, her fingers clutching her mask as if it were a shield. Poirot filed these observations away, his mind weaving connections. The spilled wine was no mere accident. It was a crack in the evening's veneer, revealing the strain beneath. As the orchestra struck up a new waltz, Poirot approached Miss Vane, bowing slightly. "Mademoiselle, might I claim a moment of your time? The air, it is warm, and the terrace offers respite." She hesitated, her eyes searching his, then nodded. They stepped onto the stone terrace, where lanterns cast a soft glow over manicured hedges. The night was cool, the stars veiled by wisps of cloud. "This manner," Poirot began, his tone conversational, "it carries the weight of history. You, I sense, know its stories well." Miss Vane's lips parted, but no sound came. She turned, her gaze to the gardens, her voice barely a whisper. "Some stories, monsieur, are not meant to be told." Before Poirot could probe further, a sharp cry echoed from within the ballroom. He turned, his cane tapping briskly as he re-entered, Miss Vane trailing behind. The music had faltered, and a crowd gathered near the grand staircase. Lord Ashburn stood at its base, his face pale, as Madame Dubois clutched his arm, her peacock. "Masked discarded. It's gone," she exclaimed, her voice trembling with theatrical flair. "My sapphire brooch, the Vane heirloom, it's been stolen from my suite." The guests murmured, their masks lending an air of conspiracy to the scene. Poirot's eyes swept the crowd, noting Sir Harold's absence and Dr. Quill's sudden stillness. Miss Vane, beside him, gasped softly, her hand flying to her throat. "The Vane heirloom?" Poirot asked, his voice low. She nodded, her eyes wide with something more than shock guilt, perhaps, or fear. Lord Ashburn raised his hands, calling for calm. "No one leaves until this is resolved," he declared, his voice strained. He turned to Poirot, a plea in his eyes. "Monsieur Poirot, your expertise. Will you assist?" Poirot inclined his head, his moustache twitching with the faintest smile. "Naturellement, Lord Ashburn. I shall investigate." The crowd parted as he moved toward the staircase, where Grayson, the butler, awaited with a key to Madame Dubois's suite. As they ascended, Poirot's mind raced. The brooch, described as a sapphire encircled by diamonds, was no mere trinket. Its theft was a deliberate act, perhaps tied to the LV invitation. Madame Dubois's dramatics suggested she knew more than she revealed, and Miss Vane's reaction hinted at a personal stake. The suite was a vision of opulence, silk drapes, a canopied bed, and a vanity strewn with perfumes. The brooch's velvet case lay open, empty, on a side table. Poirot examined the room, his gloved fingers tracing the window frame. No signs of forced entry. The lock on the door was intact, suggesting the thief had access or skill. "Madame," he said, turning to Dubois, who hovered in the doorway, "when did you last see the brooch?" Her eyes flickered, but her voice was steady. "Before the ball, monsieur. I left it here, locked in its case." Poirot nodded, his gaze lingering on a faint scuff mark near the vanity issue. Perhaps too small for a man's. He filed the detail away, then addressed Grayson. "The staff, they have been accounted for." The butler nodded. "All present, sir, and none entered this wing during the ball." Poirot's lips curved. "Very well." We returned to the ballroom. Back among the guests, the atmosphere had shifted from festive to taut. Sir Harold had reappeared, his mask now off, his face flushed as he muttered about damned distractions. Dr. Quill stood apart, his eyes fixed on Poirot with an intensity that bordered on challenge. Miss Vane had retreated to a corner, her mask clutched in her hands. Poirot addressed the room, his voice calm but commanding. "Mies, Amos, a theft has occurred, but panic is the thief's ally. I, Hercule Poirot, will uncover the truth. For now, enjoy the evening under my watchful eye." The orchestra resumed, but the waltz felt hollow. Poirot moved to a shadowed alcove, his mind alight with possibilities. The brooch's theft was no random act. It was a move in a larger game, one that LV had set in motion. The scuff mark, Sir Harold's absence, Miss Vane's fear, Quill's cryptic words each, was a piece of the puzzle. As he watched the masked figures swirl, Poirot felt the thrill of the chase, his little grey cells dancing to their own rhythm. The night had delivered a mystery worthy of his final case, and he was content to let it unfold, certain that the truth, however elusive, would soon be within his grasp. Footprints in the fog. The morning after the masked ball, Ashburn Manor lay shrouded in a fog so dense it seemed to swallow the world beyond its windows. Hercule Poirot stood at his bedroom window, the mist curling like a living thing against the glass, obscuring the gardens below. His sleep had been brief, his mind restless with the puzzle of the stolen sapphire brooch and the mysterious LV invitation. The scuff mark in Madame Dubois's suite, Sir Harold's fleeting absence, and Miss Vane's veiled fear had woven a tapestry of suspicion, but the threads remained tantalizingly loose. He adjusted his tie, his movements precise despite the ache in his joints, and resolved to seek answers in the manor's secrets. Breakfast was served in a smaller dining room, its atmosphere heavy with the previous night's unrest. The guests were subdued. Miss Eleanor Vane picked at her toast, her eyes fixed on some distant point. Sir Harold Cresswell buried himself in a newspaper, his knuckles white. Madame Celeste Dubois, ever the actress, maintained a veneer of charm, though her smile was brittle. Dr. Mortimer Quill, however, seemed alert, his gaze flitting between his companions as he sipped his tea. Lord Ashburn, at the head of the table, attempted levity, remarking on the fog's poetic gloom, but his jest fell flat. Poirot, seated near the window, observed them all, his silence a net cast wide. After breakfast, Poirot excused himself, claiming a need for fresh air. The fog was a challenge, but he welcomed its cloak. It would deter prying eyes. He donned his overcoat and hat, gripping his cane, and stepped into the gardens. The air was damp, carrying the earthy scent of moss and decay. Visibility was poor, but Poirot's senses were sharp, attuned to the faintest clues. He wandered the gravel paths, his cane tapping rhythmically, until he noticed a disturbance in the dew-soaked grass, a trail of faint footprints, barely discernible, leading toward a corner of the estate where a stone shed stood. Half hidden by ivy, the shed's door was secured with a rusted padlock, but the footprints, small, precise, ended abruptly at its threshold. Poirot knelt, ignoring the damp seeping into his trousers, and examined the ground. A single blade of grass, bent and bruised, suggested recent passage. He tested the padlock. It held firm, but the hinges were loose, hinting at frequent use. With a gloved hand, he pushed the door, and it yielded just enough to reveal a sliver of darkness within. Inside, he glimpsed a wooden crate, its lid ajar, and something glinting faintly, a scrap of paper caught in a splinter. Using his cane, Poirot nudged the door wider, careful not to disturb the scene. The paper was torn, its edges frayed, and bore a sequence of numbers and letters in a hurried scrawl. 7 to 3 NW12, a code, perhaps, or coordinates. He pocketed the scrap, his mind already turning over its implications. The shed, isolated and overlooked, was an ideal hiding place. But for what? The brooch, or something more? He straightened, his gaze sweeping the fog, and sensed he was not alone. A rustle in the nearby hedge confirmed it, but when he called out, only silence answered. The watcher, if there was one, had vanished. Returning to the manor, Poirot sought out the guests, determined to test their alibis. He found Sir Harold in the library, a cavernous room lined with leather-bound tomes. The politician was paging through a book, his movements restless. Sir Harold, Poirot began, his tone mild. Last night, during the theft, you were absent for a time. Où étiez-vous? Sir Harold's face reddened, his fingers tightening on the book. Here, Monsieur Poirot, reading. The ball was too noisy for my taste. His voice was gruff, but his eyes avoided Poirot's. Before Poirot could press further, Madame Dubois swept into the room, her silk shawl trailing like a banner. Monsieur Poirot, any progress on my poor brooch? She asked, her tone teasing but her eyes sharp. Poirot smiled thinly. Progress, madame, is a matter of perspective. Tell me, did you see Sir Harold during the ball's commotion? Her lips curved, a touch too knowingly. Oh, I saw him, near the garden doors, not the library. He seemed preoccupied. Sir Harold's jaw clenched, but he said nothing, his silence louder than any protest. Poirot excused himself and sought Dr. Quill, who was in the conservatory examining a rare orchid with clinical precision. Monsieur Quill, Poirot said, you spoke of the manor's tragedies last night. Might one involve a theft? Quill's fingers paused on the flower's petals, his expression guarded. Tragedies, monsieur, often leave traces, objects, secrets. Regrets, the brooch, perhaps, is such a trace. His words were vague, but his tone held a weight that piqued Poirot's curiosity. Miss Vane was harder to find. Secluded in a small parlour, her hands folded over a closed book, Poirot approached gently, sensing her fragility. Mademoiselle, the brooch is your family's. Does its loss carry a particular pain? Her eyes met his, haunted and searching. "It's a burden, monsieur, not a treasure," she whispered. "Its history is unkind." She would say no more, but her words confirmed Poirot's suspicion. The brooch was a key to more than a theft. As the fog began to lift, Poirot retreated to his room to study the coded scrap. The numbers 73 NW12 suggested a location or sequence. He sketched a rough map of the manor, marking the northwest wing, where the library and several guest rooms lay. 7 and 3 could indicate a floor or room number, or perhaps a measurement. 12 might be a time, a distance, or a count. The code was incomplete, but it pointed to a deliberate act tied to the manor's layout. Poirot's fingers drummed on his desk, his mind alive with possibilities. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. Grayson, the butler, stood there, his face impassive. "Monsieur Poirot, Lord Ashburn requests your presence in the study. A matter of urgency." Poirot followed, noting the butler's measured steps. In the study, Lord Ashburn stood by a window, his hands clasped tightly. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, "I've learned something troubling. Sir Harold was seen near the shed this morning, before you ventured out. Could he be involved?" Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Mercy, Lord Ashburn. All information is useful." He did not mention the footprints too small for Sir Harold's heavy tread or the code. Instead, he returned to the library, where he found a map of the manor in an old volume. The northwest wing held a disused gallery, accessible via a servant's passage. The codes NW aligned with this, and Poirot resolved to investigate after lunch. The meal was tense, the guests' civility strained. Sir Harold avoided Poirot's gaze, while Madame Dubois's chatter felt forced. Dr. Quill was silent, his eyes on Miss Vane, who barely touched her food. As coffee was served, Poirot rose, excusing himself. He slipped into the northwest wing. The air cooler here, the corridors dim. The gallery was dusty, its portraits shrouded in cloth, but a faint draught suggested a hidden door. He traced the walls, his fingers finding a seam behind a painting of a stern-faced man. The code's numbers July 3rd might indicate a mechanism, but time was short, and he marked the spot for later exploration. As he descended to rejoin the guests, Poirot felt the puzzle sharpening. The footprints, the code, Sir Harold's lie, Miss Vane's burden all, were pieces of a larger design. The fog had lifted, but the manor's secrets remained veiled, waiting for his little grey cells to pierce their shroud. He entered the drawing room, where the guests awaited, their faces a gallery of hidden truths. Satisfied with his morning's discoveries, Poirot knew the next step lay in the gallery's shadows, where the code might unlock more than a door. The hidden room, the afternoon sun pierced the lingering fog, casting slanted rays through the high windows of Ashburn Manor. Hercule Poirot, his cane clicking softly on the polished floors, moved with purpose toward the northwest wing. The coated scraps 7-3 NW1-2 burned in his pocket, its cryptic message a beacon guiding him to the disused gallery he had discovered earlier. The footprints in the fog, Sir Harold's dubious alibi, and Miss Vane's cryptic admission about the sapphire. Brooch's unkind history had sharpened his focus. The manor was a labyrinth of secrets, and Poirot sensed the gallery held a key to unravelling them. The northwest wing was quieter than the rest of the manor, its air heavy with dust and neglect. The gallery's oak doors creaked as Poirot pushed them open, revealing a long room lined with shrouded portraits and faded tapestries. The light was dim, filtered through grimy skylights, and the silence felt almost watchful. Poirot's eyes scanned the walls, recalling the seam he had found behind a painting of a stern-faced man. He approached it now, his gloved fingers tracing the frame's edges. A faint click rewarded his persistence, and the painting swung inward, revealing a narrow passage. The passage was cramped, its stone walls damp and cool. Poirot lit a small pocket torch, its beam cutting through the gloom. The air smelled of mildew and secrets, and the passage sloped downward, ending at a wooden door, its surface scarred with age. The lock was modern, an anomaly in this forgotten corner, and Poirot's lips curved. The code 7-3 NW12 might unlock it. He examined the lock, noting a series of small dials. Setting them to 7 and 3, he hesitated, then turned a third dial to 12. A soft thud echoed, and the door swung open, revealing a hidden room. The room was small, its walls lined with sagging shelves crammed with ledgers and trinkets. A single table stood at the center, holding a dusty journal bound in cracked leather. Poirot's torch swept the space, catching glints of tarnished silver locket, a broken watch, a key with no lock to match. He lifted the journal, its pages brittle but legible, and began to read. The entries, dated from the 1870s, chronicled a grim tale. A young woman, Amelia Vane, had been found dead in the manor's chapel, her throat cut. The sapphire brooch, then a newly acquired heirloom, was rumoured to carry a curse, its theft blamed for her death. The journal's author, a groundskeeper, hinted at a cover-up, implicating the Vane family patriarch. Poirot's pulse quickened. The brooch's history was no mere legend. It was a thread tying past to present. He tucked the journal under his arm, intending to study it further, when a faint noise, a scrape, like a boot on stone, came from the passage. He doused his torch and pressed himself against the wall, his heart steady despite the darkness. The sound ceased, but Poirot waited, senses straining. Whoever had followed him had retreated, or perhaps they watched still. He relit the torch and examined the doorframe, noting a fresh scratch, its edges gleaming in contrast to the aged wood. Someone had been here recently, perhaps the same person who left the footprints by the shed. Leaving the hidden room, Poirot secured the door and returned the painting to its place. The journal was heavy in his hands, its secrets a weight he carried back to the manor's livelier quarters. He sought out Miss Eleanor Vane, finding her in the rose garden, where she knelt among thorny bushes, her hands gloved and her face pale. "Mademoiselle," Poirot said, his voice gentle but firm, "the brooch, it is more than a jewel, its history, it burdens you." Her eyes met his, wide and raw. Before she looked away, her fingers tightening around a pruning shear. "It's a chain, monsieur," she said at last, her voice barely audible. "My father, he obsessed over it, said it was our legacy, but it brought only shame." She stood, brushing dirt from her gloves, and Poirot saw a flicker of defiance in her gaze. "I didn't steal it, if that's what you think." Poirot inclined his head, his expression unreadable. "I accuse no one, mademoiselle. But the truth, it will not stay hidden." She nodded, her lips trembling, and turned back to her roses, leaving Poirot to ponder her words. He next sought Lord Ashburn, who was in his study, poring over estate ledgers. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, looking up, "any progress on the brooch?" Poirot set the journal on the desk, its presence commanding attention. "This, Lord Ashburn, speaks of a murder tied to the Vane heirloom. The theft, I believe, is no simple crime." Ashburn's face paled, his fingers twitching. "A murder? Surely that's ancient history." Poirot's eyes narrowed, History, mon ami, has a way of reaching into the present. As evening approached, Poirot retired to his room to study the journal further. Its pages detailed Amelia Vane's death as a scandal hushed by her family's wealth. The groundskeeper suspected the patriarch, Charles Vane, had killed her to protect a secret perhaps. A theft of his own, masked as the brooch's curse. Poirot cross-referenced the dates with his knowledge of the Vane family, noting Miss Eleanor's father was Charles's grandson. The brooch's theft now seemed a deliberate echo of that past, but by whom and why? A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Madame Celeste Dubois stood at his door, her eyes gleaming with a mix of charm and urgency. "Monsieur Poirot, I must speak with you," she said, stepping inside without invitation. "I saw something last night, during the ball." Dr. Quilhey lingered near the northwest wing, where you were today. Her voice was low, conspiratorial, but Poirot sensed a performance. "And why, madame? Do you tell me this now?" he asked, his tone mild but probing. She smiled, a touch too brightly. "I wish only to help, monsieur. A woman notices things." Poirot thanked her, his mind already dissecting her words. Quill's interest in the manor's history, his cryptic remarks at dinner, these aligned with the hidden room's discovery. But Madame Dubois's sudden candor raised questions. Was she deflecting suspicion or playing a deeper game? As she left, Poirot returned to the journal, his fingers tracing the groundskeeper's final entry. The truth lies when no one looks. The scratch on the doorframe, the code, the footprints all pointed to a truth hidden in plain sight. Dinner was a strained affair, the guests' civility fraying. Sir Harold drank heavily, his laughter forced. Miss Vane was silent, her eyes on her plate. Dr. Quill spoke of obscure manuscripts, his gaze flicking to Poirot. Madame Dubois, radiant in emerald silk, steered the conversation to trivialities, but her glances toward Quill were sharp. Poirot ate sparingly, his mind elsewhere, mapping the manor's secrets. The hidden room had yielded a vital clue, and the scratch suggested someone else knew of it. The brooch's theft was a spark, but the fire it ignited burned deeper, tied to a murder long buried as the evening ended. Poirot stood by the dining room's window, the night beyond a mirror of his thoughts, dark, layered, and restless. The journal was a breakthrough, its revelations tying the brooch to a crime that still cast shadows. He felt the puzzle's pieces aligning, each guest a player in a drama orchestrated by L.V. Satisfied with the day's progress, Poirot retired to his room, the journal under his arm, certain that the next clue lay not in the manor's past, but in the secrets its present occupants guarded so fiercely. The midnight confession. The night was restless, the air in Ashburn Manor thick with the weight of unspoken truths. Hercule Poirot sat at the small desk in his room. The journal from the hidden room opened before him, its pages a map of a murder. The sapphire brooch, stolen during the masked ball, was no mere jewel but a symbol of a buried crime. Its theft a deliberate act to stir the manor's ghosts. The coded scrap, the footprints in the fog, and Miss Eleanor Vane's haunted admission had deepened the mystery. But Poirot's little grey cells were alight, piecing together a puzzle that grew more intricate with each revelation. As the clock struck 11, a soft knock broke the silence. Poirot rose, his cane in hand, and opened the door to find Madame Celeste Dubois, her face pale beneath a silk shawl, her eyes wide with urgency. "Monsieur Poirot," she whispered, glancing down the darkened corridor, "I must speak with you alone." Her voice trembled, not with fear, but with the practiced cadence of a performer. Poirot gestured her inside, closing the door with a soft click. "Madame, the hour is late. What compels such secrecy?" he asked, his tone calm but piercing. She hesitated, her fingers twisting the shawl's fringe, then sat on the edge of a chair, her posture rigid. "I lied earlier about Dr. Quill," she began, her voice low. "It wasn't him I saw near the northwest wing during the ball. It was someone else entering Miss Vane's suite." Poirot's eyes narrowed, his moustache twitching slightly. "And who, madame, did you see?" She leaned forward, her breath catching. "It was the historian, Dr. Quill, but not where I said. He slipped into Miss Vane's room just before the brooch was reported stolen. I didn't want to say before too many ears." Poirot studied her, his mind sifting her words for truth. Madame Dubois's confession was a calculated move, her earlier deflection about Quill's whereabouts a misdirection. "And why, madame? Do you trust me with this now?" he asked, his voice soft but unyielding. She met his gaze, her eyes glinting with a mix of defiance and fear. "Because, monsieur, I know your reputation. You see through lies, and I am tired of playing games." Her words hung in the air, heavy with implication, but Poirot sensed a deeper motive, perhaps a desire to shift suspicion, or to protect her own secrets. Before he could probe further, a sudden crack split the silence, followed by a muffled cry from somewhere below. Poirot's head snapped toward the door, his cane already in hand. "Stay here, madame," he said, his tone brooking no argument. He moved swiftly, his age forgotten in the surge of adrenaline, and descended the grand staircase, the manor's shadows dancing in the flickering light of wall sconces. The cry had come from the east wing, near the guest quarters. As he approached, he saw a figure slumped against a corridor wall, illuminated by a single candle on a nearby table. It was Dr. Mortimer Quill, his spectacles askew, a fresh bruise blooming on his temple. He was conscious but dazed, his breathing shallow. Poirot knelt beside him, his torch casting a stark light over the scene. "Monsieur Quill, what has happened?" he asked, his voice steady. Quill blinked, his hand rising to his head. "Someone struck me," he murmured. "I was checking my notes in my room." Poirot's eyes swept the corridor. No weapon, no footprints, but a faint scent of lavender lingered, unfamiliar in the manor's usual blend of polish and dust. He helped Quill to a chair, summoning Grayson, who appeared with his usual efficiency. "Fetch water and a cloth," Poirot instructed, then turned back to Quill. "Your notes, monsieur, what were they about?" Quill's eyes flickered, a spark of wariness returning. "The manor's history, the Vane family. I found something, a letter hinting at a hidden safe." Poirot's pulse quickened, but he kept his expression neutral. "And where is this safe?" Quill shook his head, wincing. "I don't know, only that it's here, in the east wing." Grayson returned, and Poirot directed him to escort Quill to his room. Alone, Poirot examined the corridor, his torch revealing a scuff on the carpet, too vague to be conclusive. The attack on Quill was no accident. It was a warning, or perhaps an attempt, to silence him. Poirot moved to Quill's room, which Grayson had left unlocked. The space was Spartan, its desk cluttered with papers and books. A quick search revealed the letter Quill mentioned, yellowed page, its ink faded but legible, describing a safe behind a panel in the east wing, built to conceal family shame. Poirot's fingers brushed a stack of documents, and one caught his eye. A forged deed, bearing Sir Harold Cresswell's name, tied to a property scandal from years past. The discovery was a jolt to Harold's presence at the manor. His nervous demeanour now took on new weight. Was Quill blackmailing him, or was the deed planted to mislead? Poirot pocketed the letter about the safe, leaving the deed for now, and returned to his room, where Madame Dubois waited, her face a mask of concern. "You found him?" she asked, rising. Poirot nodded, his eyes searching hers. "Dr. Quill was attacked, Madame. Your confession, it seems, was timely." She paled, her hand fluttering to her throat. "Attacked? Mon Dieu, this place is cursed." Poirot's smile was thin. "Not cursed, Madame, merely full of secrets. Bonne nuit." She left, her footsteps echoing in the silent corridor, and Poirot locked his door, his mind racing. The letter about the safe was a new piece of the puzzle, but Quill's attack raised the stakes. The lavender scent, the forged deed, Madame Dubois' sudden candor, all pointed to a web of motives tightening around the brooch's theft. Poirot sat at his desk, the journal and the letter side by side, and began to map the connections. The safe, if it existed, might hold the brooch or evidence of the Vane family's past. Quill's knowledge made him a target, but by whom? Sir Harold, whose secrets were exposed. Miss Vane, guarding her family's shame. Or Madame Dubois, whose confession felt too perfectly timed. As midnight tolled, the manor seemed to hold its breath, its walls whispering of crimes old and new. Poirot leaned back, his eyes gleaming in the lamplight. The attack on Quill was a bold move, but it had revealed more than the culprit intended. The safe, the deed, the lavender scenthes were threads in a tapestry. Poirot was beginning to unravel. He felt the thrill of the chase, his little grey cells humming with purpose. Satisfied that the night had brought him closer to the truth, he extinguished his lamp, content to let the manor's shadows guard their secrets until morning, when he would seek the safe and the answers it promised. The garden's secret, the dawn broke over Ashburn Manor with a pale, reluctant light. The fog of the previous day replaced by a crisp clarity that sharpened the estate's Gothic silhouette. Hercule Poirot stood at his window, his eyes tracing the gardens below, where dew glistened on manicured hedges and rose beds. The events of the night, Madame Celeste Dubois's midnight confession, Dr. Mortimer Quill's attack, and the discovery of a letter hinting at a hidden safe had intensified. The mystery of the stolen sapphire brooch, the forged deed bearing Sir Harold Cresswell's name, and the faint scent of lavender lingered in Poirot's mind. Threads in a tapestry of deceit that pointed to a deeper truth. Today, he resolved to explore the gardens, where intuition told him another clue awaited. After a breakfast marked by strained silences, Miss Eleanor Vane's pallor more pronounced, Sir Harold's forced joviality grating, and Quill's bruised temple a silent accusation, Poirot slipped away, his cane tapping a steady rhythm as he descended to the gardens. The air was sharp with the scent of earth and blooming jasmine, and the paths wound through sculpted topiaries and a lily pond that shimmered like glass. Poirot's eyes, ever vigilant, caught a patch of disturbed soil near a stone fountain, its surface uneven as if recently turned. The fountain, carved with cherubs and vines, stood at the garden's heart, a relic of the manor's opulent past. Kneeling with care, Poirot examined the soil. It was loose, marked by faint impressions of a trowel and a single petal lavender, crushed but fragrantly caught in the dirt. His pulse quickened. The scent from last night's corridor was no coincidence. He dug gently, his gloved hands unearthing a small, locked metal box, its surface tarnished but intact. The lock was simple, and Poirot, with a hairpin from his pocket, coaxed it open in moments. Inside lay the sapphire brooch, or so it seemed. The gem gleamed, encircled by diamonds, but Poirot's keen eye noted a flaw in the sapphire's cut, a subtle irregularity absent from Madame Dubois's description. It was a fake, a clever decoy. He pocketed the box, his mind racing. The fake brooch suggested a calculated ruse, perhaps to mislead the thief's pursuers, or to protect the real jewel. The lavender petal linked the garden to Quill's attack. But whose hand had planted this decoy? Poirot rose, brushing soil from his trousers, and scanned the garden. A shadow flickered behind a yew hedge, too swift to identify, but the rustle of leaves confirmed he was watched. He made no move to pursue, instead memorizing the hedge's position for later investigation. Returning to the manor, Poirot sought Sir Harold Cresswell, whose connection to the forged deed made him a prime suspect. He found the politician in the billiard room, alone, idly rolling a cue ball across the green felt. "Sir Harold," Poirot began, his tone deceptively genial, "you are familiar with these gardens, perhaps you walked them this morning." Sir Harold's hand froze, his eyes narrowing. "I've no time for strolls, Poirot. Too much on my mind." His voice was gruff, but his fingers twitched, betraying unease. Poirot leaned closer, his voice soft. "The garden holds secrets, monsieur, and secrets, they have a way of finding the light." Sir Harold's face flushed, but before he could respond, a sharp rap on the door interrupted. Grayson, the butler, entered, his expression impassive. "Monsieur Poirot, Lord Ashburn requests you in the library." Poirot nodded, filing away. Sir Harold's reaction, and followed Grayson. In the library, Lord Ashburn stood by a towering bookshelf, his hands clasped tightly. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice low, "Dr. Quill mentioned a family legend to me this morning, a vault beneath the manor tied to the Vane family. Could it be connected to the brooch?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. The vault aligned with the letter about the safe, and the fake brooch suggested a larger scheme. "Mercy, Lord Ashburn. This vault, where might it be?" Ashburn shook his head. "The legend is vague, somewhere below the old chapel, perhaps." Quill was researching it before his incident. Poirot thanked him and requested a moment alone, his gaze sweeping the library shelves. A volume on local history caught his eye, its pages detailing the manor's chapel, built over a crypt rumoured to house Vane family treasures. As lunch approached, Poirot sought Miss Vane, hoping to probe her connection to the brooch's history. He found her in the conservatory, tending a tray of orchids, her hands steady but her eyes distant. "Mademoiselle," he said, "the brooch, it is a weight upon your family. Is there a vault, perhaps, where such burdens are kept?" Her fingers faltered, snapping a stem, and she turned, her face pale but composed. "A vault. My father spoke of one, but only in jest. It's a myth, monsieur, like the curse." Her voice was firm, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt. Nodded, his mind cataloguing her reaction alongside Sir Harold's unease and Quill's cryptic knowledge. The fake brooch, buried in the garden, was a deliberate act, perhaps to distract from the real jewel's hiding place, the vault. He excused himself and returned to his room, where he examined the box again. The fake brooch was well crafted, its flaws subtle, suggesting a skilled hand. The lavender petal, though, was a clue to the culprit's identity. It sent a signature he would trace. At lunch, the guests' tensions were palpable. Sir Harold avoided Poirot's gaze, his fork scraping his plate. Madame Dubois's laughter rang hollow, her eyes darting to Quill, who ate sparingly, his bruise stark against his pallor. Miss Vane was silent, her hands folded tightly. Poirot observed them all, his mind weaving connections. The vault, if it existed, was the next step, but the garden's secret had shifted the puzzle's shape. The fake brooch was a decoy, but for whom, and why plant it where it could be found? As the meal ended, Poirot slipped back to the garden, retracing his steps to the yew hedge where he'd seen the shadow. A narrow path led to a greenhouse, its glass panes fogged with age. Inside, he found a pair of gardening gloves, faintly scented with lavender, tucked behind a potting bench. The gloves were small, suggesting a woman's hand, Miss Vane or Madame Dubois, perhaps. The discovery tightened the web of suspicion. But Poirot needed more to unravel the truth. Returning to the manor, he paused at the chapel's entrance, its stone archway carved with faded saints. The vault, if real, lay below, and the letters. Mention of a safe in the east wing suggested a misdirection. Poirot's lips curved. The puzzle was complex, but its pieces were aligning. The fake brooch, the lavender, Sir Harold's lie, Miss Vane's denial all pointed to a truth buried deeper than the garden's soil. Satisfied with the day's revelations, Poirot resolved to find the vault. Certain it held the key to the brooch's fate and the manor's long-guarded secrets. The vault of truth. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Ashburn Manor, its golden light filtering through the chapel's stained glass windows, painting the stone floor in hues of crimson and sapphire. Hercule Poirot stood at the chapel's entrance, his cane resting lightly in his hand, his mind a whirl of connections. The fake brooch unearthed in the garden, the lavender-scented gloves, Sir Harold Cresswell's forged deed, and the legend of a vault beneath the chapel, had drawn him here. The journal's tale of Amelia Vane's murder, tied to the stolen sapphire brooch, suggested a crime that echoed through time, orchestrated by the mysterious L.V. Poirot's little grey cells hummed with anticipation. The vault, if it existed, promised answers to the manor's tangled secrets. The chapel was a relic of devotion and secrecy, its pews worn smooth by centuries of whispered prayers. Poirot moved slowly, his eyes scanning the walls for signs of a hidden entrance. The letter found in Dr. Mortimer Quill's room had mentioned a safe in the east wing, but Lord Ashburn's tale of a vault beneath the chapel felt truer, aligning with the manor's history. He tapped his cane against the flagstones, listening for hollow echoes. Near the altar, a faint irregularity caught his azure stone slightly misaligned, its edges worn differently from its neighbours. He knelt, his joints protesting, and pressed the stone. A low grinding sound followed, and a section of the floor slid aside, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. Poirot lit his pocket torch, its beam cutting through the musty air. The stairs were steep, carved from the manor's bedrock, and led to a heavy iron door, its surface etched with a faint rose emblem matching the watermark on the L.V. letter. The door was unlocked, a fact that gave Poirot pause. Someone had been here recently. He pushed it open, revealing a small vault, its walls lined with stone niches. At its center stood a pedestal holding a velvet-lined box. Inside gleamed the sapphire brooch, its diamonds sparkling like stars, its authenticity unmistakable. Beside it lay a bundle of letters tied with a faded ribbon. Poirot lifted the brooch, its weight confirming its genuineness, unlike the garden's decoy. He untied the letters, scanning their contents. They were written by Charles Vane, Miss Eleanor Vane's great-grandfather, confessing to Amelia Vane's murder in 1873. The brooch, he wrote, was stolen from a rival family, and Amelia, his sister, had threatened to expose him. Her death was no accident, but a desperate act to preserve the Vane legacy. The letters were a confession and a curse, binding the family to silence. Poirot's lips tightened. The brooch's theft was no random crime, but a deliberate unearthing of this buried truth. A faint creak from the stairs snapped his attention upward. He doused his torch and stepped into a niche, his breath steady despite the darkness. Footsteps descended, slow and deliberate, and a figure entered, their silhouette framed by a lantern's glow. It was Dr. Quill, his bruise stark against his pale face, his eyes wide with purpose. He approached the pedestal, freezing when he saw the open box. "It's gone," he muttered, his voice taut with panic. Poirot stepped forward, his torch relighting. "Not gone, Monsieur Quill. Merely found." Quill started, his hand flying to his chest. "Monsieur Poirot, I was verifying the vault's existence." His words were rushed, unconvincing. Poirot's gaze was unyielding. "You knew of this place, we, and the letters." Quill's shoulders sagged, his defiance crumbling. "I found references in the library, yes. I stole the fake brooch to force the truth out about the Vanes. Their lies. Someone attacked me for it." Poirot nodded, pocketing the letters. "And the real brooch you left here?" Quill shook his head. "I never touched it. I only wanted the story." Poirot escorted Quill back to the manor, the brooch and letters. Secure in his coat, he summoned the guests to the drawing room, where the fire cast flickering shadows across their tense faces. Miss Vane sat rigid, her hands clasped. Sir Harold's fingers drummed nervously. Madame Dubois's smile was a brittle mask. Lord Ashburn watched with quiet dread. Poirot held up the brooch, its sapphire catching the light. "Mies Amos, the jewel is recovered, but its theft was a spark to ignite a greater truth," he recounted. The vault's discovery and the letter's confession, watching their reactions. Miss Vane's eyes filled with tears, her voice a whisper. "My father. He knew, and it broke him." Sir Harold's face darkened, his voice gruff. "I planted the fake brooch in the garden, Poirot. I thought it would end the scrutiny. Past can't afford more scandal." Madame Dubois remained silent, her eyes flicking to Quill, who admitted, "I took the fake to expose the murder, but I didn't touch the real one." Poirot's voice was calm but commanding. "The theft was a ruse, but its purpose is yet unclear. The letters reveal a crime, but the thief who remains hidden sought to stir this truth." He returned the brooch to Miss Vane, whose fingers trembled as she took it. "Mademoiselle, it is yours, but its weight is heavy. Guard it well." She nodded, her eyes haunted but resolute. As the guests dispersed, Poirot lingered, his mind turning over the final piece. LV, the initials, the rose watermark, the orchestrated theft all pointed to a mind behind the chaos, one that had drawn him here. The vault had yielded the brooch and the truth of Amelia's murder, but the puppet master remained in shadow. Poirot felt the thrill of the chase, his little grey cells alive with the challenge, satisfied that the day had brought him closer. To the heart of the mystery, he retired to his room, the letters and brooch safe, certain that the final act was near. The final revelation, the morning sun bathed Ashburn Manor in a golden glow, its rays filtering through the drawing room's tall windows, casting intricate patterns on the polished floor. Hercule Poirot stood at the room's center, his cane planted firmly, his mustache impeccably groomed despite the weight of the mystery that had consumed him. The sapphire brooch, recovered from the vault beneath the chapel, rested on a velvet cushion on the mantel, its diamonds glinting like captured stars. The letters confessing Charles Vane's murder of Amelia Vane lay beside it, their faded ink. A testament to a century-old crime. The guests Miss Eleanor Vane, Sir Harold Cresswell, Madame Celeste Dubois, Dr. Mortimer Quill, and Lord Ashburn sat in a tense semicircle, their faces a gallery of anticipation, guilt, and dread. Poirot had summoned them for his denouement, the moment when the threads of the mystery woven through footprints, codes, a fake brooch, and a hidden vault would be tied into a single truth. Monsieur et Madame, Poirot began, his voice clear and resonant. The theft of the sapphire brooch was no mere crime of greed. It was a carefully orchestrated act designed to draw me, Hercule Poirot, to Ashburn Manor. The invitation, signed LV, was the first move in a game of truth and deception. His eyes swept the room, noting Miss Vane's clasped hands, Sir Harold's flushed cheeks, Madame Dubois's poised stillness, Quill's wary gaze, and Lord Ashburn's furrowed brow. Let us unravel this puzzle, step by step, and reveal the hand that set it in motion. He gestured to the brooch. The jewel, stolen during the masked ball, was found in the vault beneath the chapel, alongside letters confessing a murder committed by Charles Vane in 1873. The theft was not for gain, but to expose this crime, to force a reckoning with the past. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. Dr. Quill, you admitted to stealing a fake brooch, planting it in the garden to stir suspicion. You sought to uncover the Vane family's secret, believing it would redeem your own scholarly pursuits. Maze, you did not touch the real brooch, Nan. Quill nodded, his bruise stark against his pale skin. I only wanted the truth, Monsieur Poirot. The letters, I knew they existed, but not where. Poirot inclined his head, his gaze shifting to Sir Harold. And you, Sir Harold, planted the fake brooch in the garden, hoping to deflect scrutiny from your own pastor-forged deed, found among Dr. Quill's papers, tied to your disgrace. You feared exposure, Sir Harold's jaw tightened, but he muttered, I had to protect myself. The scandal, it would ruin me again. Poirot turned to Madame Dubois, whose smile was a delicate mask. Madame, your confession about seeing Dr. Quill near Miss Vane's suite was a half-truth, designed to shift suspicion. Your own history of blackmail, uncovered in whispers, suggests you played a part in this drama, perhaps to gain leverage. Her eyes flashed, but she remained silent, her fingers tightening on her shawl. Poirot's gaze softened as it fell on Miss Vane. Mademoiselle, the brooch is your family's burden, its history a chain of shame. You knew of the vault, did you not? Yet you did not steal the jewel. Miss Vane's voice was barely a whisper. I couldn't bear its weight any more, monsieur, but I didn't take it. Poirot nodded, his expression one of quiet compassion. He stepped forward, his cane tapping once, and addressed the room. The initials LV are not a person, but a vow, last vow, a promise made by a descendant of Amelia Vane to restore her honor. The rose watermark on the invitation, the coded scrap, the lavender-scented gloves all point to one mind, one heart, orchestrating this mystery. He turned to Miss Vane, his voice gentle but unyielding. It was you, Mademoiselle Eleanor, who engineered the theft. You invited me here, signing as LV to honor your ancestors' memory. You stole the real brooch, placing it in the vault to ensure its discovery, and planted the fake in the garden to create chaos. You used Dr. Quill's curiosity, Sir Harold's fear, and Madame Dubois's cunning to stir the manor's secrets, knowing I would uncover the truth of your great-grandfather's crime. Miss Vane's eyes filled with tears, her hands trembling. I had to, monsieur, my father. He died haunted by what Charles did. I wanted the truth to be free, for Amelia's sake. I took the brooch, yes, and hid it where it would be found. I sent the letter, hoping you'd see what I could not say. Her voice broke, but her gaze was steady, a spark of resolve amid her grief. Poirot's moustache twitched, a rare softness in his eyes. You sought justice, mademoiselle, not revenge. The truth is now known, but I shall not expose you. The Vane name has suffered enough. He turned to the others. Sir Harold, your deed is a private matter, but beware secrets breed suspicion. Madame Dubois, your games are your own, but they have no place here. Dr. Quill, your quest for truth is noble, but reckless. Lord Ashburn, your hospitality has served a greater purpose. He lifted the brooch, handing it to Miss Vane. This belongs to you, mademoiselle, not as a curse, but as a reminder of truth and of healing. She took it, her fingers steady now, a weight lifted. The room was silent, the air charged with the resolution of a long-buried pain. Poirot stepped back, his cane resting lightly, his work complete. As the guests dispersed, Poirot lingered by the window, the manor's gardens stretching into the distance, serene in the morning light. Lord Ashburn approached, his voice low. Monsieur Poirot, will you stay another day? Poirot smiled, shaking his head. Nan, Lord Ashburn, my task is done. The truth is free, and I, Hercule Poirot, am content. He left the drawing-room, his steps measured but purposeful, and packed his valise with care. By noon, he was in a car bound for the station, the manor receding behind him. The LV letter lay in his pocket, a memento of his final case. The mystery had tested his little grey cells, weaving past and present into a tapestry of justice. Miss Vane's vow, fulfilled through his deductions, had restored balance without further ruin. As the countryside rolled by, Poirot reflected on the weight of truth, its power to heal or destroy. He closed his eyes, the hum of the car a lullaby, satisfied that his last puzzle had ended not in triumph, but in peace of fitting close to his storied career.